we'll get started by talking a little bit about your background. And so I think obviously you were trained as a synthetic organic chemist in Richmond's group. So I guess how is the shift into your independent career, and how generally, as you're concerned about computers and synthesis, how have you been able to incorporate them so far, or how would you like to incorporate them in the future?
Awesome. Yeah, so I'll just expound a little bit on my background. So I did my undergraduate studies at Southern Adventist University in Tennessee, where I really fell in love with organic chemistry as a whole. And then I came, as you said, to join the Sarpong lab at Berkeley and worked on natural product synthesis, total synthesis, specifically on the diterpenoid alkaloid casonidine. And through that synthesis, I started to work on benzyne chemistry, arine chemistry. So thinking about strained molecules, how they could be used for a complex molecule synthesis. And then after that, I went to do postdoctoral research with Professor Helma Venemers at the ETH in Zurich. And they're working on tripeptide catalysts and really thinking about what the conformation was and how that tied into the reactivity. And so there I got to work on a lot more computational chemistry and learn some of the different software packages and learn about what some conformational searches look like, and and how we can really start to model these peptides and think about how that ties into their reactivity. And so kind of thinking about that trajectory, tying in the organic synthesis, tying on the conformational modeling, thinking about my experience in computational chemistry in my postdoc, I really wanted to tie all of those together in my own independent career. And so my group now at Colorado College, we're looking at benzyne chemistry, arine chemistry, these strained intermediates, and how we can use computations to model them, especially because these strained compounds are so short-lived that the modeling helps give us a really good foundation for that. And so the computational computer-assisted part of my group is still kind of getting up and running. We're still working on establishing that, but we've started some method development, and I'm really excited to tie these together and see where we can go with that.
There's a lot of like hype about machine learning or some of those buzzwords. Those, it doesn't sound like they fit in so far with your research, which is a more kind of classical modeling, which is a lot of how I got started. What do you have to say to just generally people who think machine learning is overhyped, or any thoughts about machine learning as we throw the buzzwords out there?
Right. No, I'm pretty new actually to the machine learning area. Just like you said, my introduction to computer-assisted chemistry in general has been through some, in grad school, my physical organic class, we did a little bit of modeling in Gaussian, just got a little taste there, and then coming into some modeling later. But I'm excited about, a lot of the areas in synthesis, it's either brute force or you're trying to comb through a lot of literature and decide what's the best step. And so I think there's an opportunity really to mine that information and put it into something that's useful and applicable, that doesn't negate the intuition that the chemist brings, and you have to be judicious about what you use and how. But I think having the machine learning aspect, especially what I've learned about groups in C-CAS doing thus far, will really give us some strong and powerful tools to aid the way we think about molecule synthesis or reaction optimization.
How would you address the sentiment that computers are coming for our jobs?
Yeah, computers are coming for our jobs. I don't think they're coming for our jobs. I think they're going to help us do our jobs. I think there's, and I myself am personally guilty of this, where it can be easier to hold on to kind of the way that I know how to do a thing, rather than to take a little time and learn a new tool and that might streamline some things. So I find myself resisting, some new technology sometimes just because I know the way that I do it and I'm just comfortable with that. So I think that there is a challenge, sometimes a barrier between finding these new techniques. But I'm of the opinion that this can only help streamline our time, right? These methods that we're developing, and even the robots. I've never gotten I've seen them, but I've never gotten to do any robot chemistry. But even that can help streamline. We're going to have to do it by hand at some point. We're going to have to scale up at some point. So there is going to be this tie in there. But to me, I see computer assistance only helping us, and really also only being fed by what we've done and what we know, right? And so it's this kind of, I don't know if I would call it a symbiotic relationship, but like some kind of connection that we have in there that we're always going to be needed.
I think organic chemists who, you know, have tried to reproduce an SI and haven't been able to, you know, there's always kind of a sense about how reproducible our data is, and more than that, how can we disseminate that in a really good way?
Yeah.
So that wasn't a question, but I think.
Well, you know, I think it's an important statement. I've been thinking about it a lot as I've been involved in these C-CAS conversations, you know, in reactions that I've run over the years that like didn't work. But, you know, what did I take from them? And was it quantifiable, or was it more qualitative, or was it more just like, this was black gunk and I just tossed it? Like, you know, where along the spectrum, what data did I take from it, and how is it recorded? And to your point about SI, I mean, I talk with my students a lot. We go through an SI and they'll run it, and sometimes it works great and that's awesome, and sometimes it doesn't, because there's a little piece in there that we have to kind of figure out and work out. But this idea of kind of documentation and where those data go and come from, this is kind of like a non-answer to your non-question to your statement, but I've been thinking a lot about that, kind of how we document data and how it can be useful, you know, because there's so much that doesn't get told. And a lot of times you'll find, I always enjoy like full synthesis papers where they kind of tell you the directions and how the dead ends went in, or if you have a conversation with a student or a postdoc and kind of hear the intricate details, you start to piece together kind of what or why or how. And so to your point about data, as we think about that in C-CAS, I've been intrigued and encouraged by the conversations about how to really connect and convey those data, even the stuff that didn't work, even the stuff that doesn't make it into the final work. I have no strong like answers on how that's done, but I think it's so important because that's a lot of times where some of the interesting stuff is.
So I know we've just gotten started with kind of the Data Chemists Network, and so you're obviously a founding member of that. So how do you think that will play into your research group going forward, or how do you see that falling in?
Yeah, so I'm really excited about the Data Chemists Network because it allows for a strong network of collaboration, support, insight. I think one of the great things about this Centers for Chemical Innovation in general is this collaboration, this kind of moving forward and not being alone in this journey, and being able to support each other with our different expertise. And as an extension of that, also being able to support our students in that way. And so what I'm excited about with the Data Chemist Network is the current 5 faculty, we have students in different areas, we're in different types of institutions, we have students along different pathways and different areas of expertise that we can combine together within the context of computer-assisted synthesis and train our students, develop collaborations among ourselves and among C-CAS PIs, students who are coming out of C-CAS, right, as they're graduating or finishing their postdocs. And so really establishing and broadening this network so that we can have more of a stance in this field and continue to grow in this field. And so I think it has the potential to be really strong, and I'm excited about the conversations we've had thus far.
So what kind of significant changes do you think are going to happen to the field of synthesis in the next 10 years? Or maybe what would you like to see? And so I think, we're primed to talk about computers, but this could be anything that you think could be coming down the pipeline for synthetic chemists.
Well, there's a range. I mean, I always love thinking about basic reactivity and thinking about new bonds that can be formed or broken. And so I always am intrigued in finding the pockets that we don't know a lot about in terms of the ways we can make molecules, and so developing new methods in that way. But I do think a lot about kind of this this more streamlined way to take synthesis and then kind of go that next step and use the molecules in different ways, modify them in ways we never knew possible. So I kind of see synthesis, and it kind of is now, but going increasingly into a space where you have a center target and then you can just do so many possible things, or you can kind of toss them to different fields and see all these different applications. So I see synthesis maybe integrating itself a little bit more with other fields around it, because I love synthesis for the synthesis, but I also love synthesis for the connections that it has. And so becoming increasingly, I feel like in the last 10 years, since I started grad school, it feels like, yeah, that I've seen that increase. And I feel like in the next 10 years, that'll increase even more, this intentional collaboration, this using of gaps in other fields and seeing how we can really apply synthesis to that, while simultaneously looking for those basic gaps, those bond breaking and forming and new methods that I think are still always intriguing.
Mm-hmm.